here, Tux. My audience wants to see how cute you are. See how cute he is? You don't like being picked up. See, Mommy, let me down. I don't like being picked up. Alright, there you go. Alrighty. So, first of all, this is the only thing I'm going to say about this, okay? Go out and vote. My fellow Americans, go out and vote. It's late October 2022 here right now. And, just get out and vote. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right. Now, let's get on with the show. And it's from this book, Let's Get Biblical, Volume 1. Yes, we're still on Volume 1. And remember, there's a Volume 2 out, so we will be covering that as well. And no, I don't just go by this book. I do know a lot about this stuff from the archaeology of Israel to, other secular sources. So I bring that knowledge into my review of this book. By the way, hi, Rabbi. Love your stuff. I'm an atheist. You're a dude. That's fine. That's cool. At least from my perspective. You have your beliefs. I have my beliefs. That's cool. All right. Alrighty. So today we're talking about Jewish law and Christianity. Now, when we're talking about the Jewish law, we're basically talking about the oral law, talking about the Torah, basically. Okay. Now, I will say this, and I have said this, as far as I know, and the Jews can correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, the Jews believe that only the Jews are obligated to follow the Torah. There are things called the Noahide commandments, and according to Jewish tradition, everyone is obligated to keep the Noahide commandments. But I've looked at the Noahide commandments, and unless you're really a piece of shit, you're already keeping the Noahide commandments. Okay. So let's get on with it, shall we? Okay, so let's start out today with the church's attitude toward oral law. Okay, now Most of us who grew up as Christians know that, for the most part, Christianity rejects the idea that we have to keep the law. That's a tenet of Christianity. There are strains of Christianity that will say you have to keep some of the law. And as far as I know, every Christian denomination says you have to keep the 10 Commandments. That's interesting. Let's talk about that for a moment. Because the 10 Commandments are part of the oral law. Okay? The 10 Commandments are part of the oral law. Now that's interesting. Why would Christians say you have to keep the 10 Commandments and then not say anything about all the other commandments in the oral law? I mean, for the most part, at least 5 of the 10 Commandments make sense. Okay? Half of them are talking about sucking God's dick. Sorry, Rabbi. But at least half of them make sense, right? But then you've got other commandments like, not planting peas near potatoes. What's that all about? I mean, why does it matter? Why does it matter? And I'm not a farmer, obviously. So if you're a farmer, you can tell me in the comments, why does it matter if you plant peas near potatoes? Doesn't make sense, does it? Hey, Free. Now, I mean, I suppose there's a reason. I suppose you can say something about, well, peas take up nutrients that potatoes don't. Well, that's fine. That's all well and good, but that can be taken care of by crop rotation, And like I said, I don't know anything about farming. So, if I'm way off base, forgive me here. But at any rate, moving on. All right. So then, and what is all of this about? Oh, that's fine, Free. And what is this about not mixing 2 fabrics together? Why? What sense does that make? Who the fuck cares if you mix 2 fabrics together? Who cares? It just doesn't make any sense. Don't boil a kid in his mother's milk. To tell you the honest truth, I didn't even know that was a thing. And yes, that is a commandment in the oral law. Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. Had no idea that was a thing that needed to be, Hey, Snake. Had no idea that was something that needed to go down in, the oral law. Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. Apparently that was a thing. All right. Over the past 1800 years, almost every Christian denomination has rejected the oral Torah, generally with contempt. The New Testament attests that the early Christians took the Mosaic origin of the oral law for granted, never questioning its authenticity and authority. And you can see that with with Peter and Paul, where they're going to these congregations, and these congregations are saying, well, what's up with the law of Moses? Are we supposed to keep the law of Moses as Christians, or do we do away with the law of Moses since we are now in the age of grace? And you can see this going back and forth. Exactly, Free. Exactly. Jesus said he had come to fulfill the law, but not one jot or tittle of the law should pass away till all be fulfilled. So do with that what you may. Do with that what you may. Okay, there were 3 sects during Jesus' time. They were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. Okay, so we don't really understand what the Essenes believed. Although we know that they believed in baptism. John was an Essene. John the Baptist was an Essene. And Jesus probably, if he existed, was an Essene. Okay, so we don't know much about the Essenes. We suspect that they were celibate, but we don't know that for sure, which would be a major break from Judaism, because it was a Jewish man's duty to marry. Yes, it is free. And you can see that in the cult of Dionysus. Because the cult of Dionysus also has baptism. So it wasn't just the Essenes doing baptism. I mean, we have a lot of cultures doing baptism. And to tell you the truth, we don't even know how far baptism goes back. We don't. We have no fucking clue how far baptism goes back. Yeah, right, Snake? All right, moving on. I just wanted to say that thing about baptism, because for some reason Christians think it's a Christian thing, but then you think about it, right? And just think about this for just 2 seconds. Okay, think about this for 2 seconds. Christians will say they get baptized because Jesus was baptized. And they're following the example of Jesus, but Paul says baptism is for the remission of sins. But Christians believe Jesus was sinless. So if baptism is for the remission of sins, why did Jesus get baptized? Make it make sense. Make it make sense. Yes, free. We've already gone through that. But the Essenes were Jewish. The Essenes were Jewish. That was my point. Okay. So the Pharisees and Sadducees, it was well known that there were debates and all this kind of shit flying between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Josephus described one conflict as a class warfare because the wealthy and the poor, as the Sadducees included mainly the priestly and aristocratic families. Another conflict was cultural. Sadducees favored Hellenization and the Pharisees resisted it. So at this time, most Jews were Hellenized. And you can see this, okay? I mean, you just can. I probably will be going over the Hellenization of the Jews at some point. But the Hellenization of the Jews started way back with the carrying away into Babylon. That's when it started. And then, of course, they had a theological clash. The Sadducees said only the written Torah is real. We can't base anything on oral Torah, which, if you think about it, it makes sense to a certain degree because, you've got the written Torah and, assuming nobody changes it on purpose, which does happen. Assuming nobody changes it on purpose, then, the written Torah is the written Torah, whereas mistakes can creep into the oral Torah, right? You pass it along generation to generation, and mistakes can creep in. It's just how oral tradition works, right? So that makes a little bit of sense. They claimed the soul is not immortal and insisted that there is no afterlife or rewards or penalties after death, and rejected the belief in the resurrection of the dead. Okay, so that's where the Sadducees stand, right? That's where the Sadducees stand. The Pharisees received the backing of the common people because, again, the Sadducees were made up mainly of the priestly class. The Pharisees claimed Mosaic authority for their interpretation of the Jewish laws, while the Sadducees represented the authority, the priestly class, blah, blah, blah. We see this all over the place. We see this playing out now. As long as there's been classes, there's been class of classes. Sorry. Okay. So almost immediately from the birth of Christianity, and remember, the Christians are going to tell you Christianity started with Jesus, when that's really not the case. That really isn't the case. Christianity didn't start until Constantine. I'm not even going to get into that right now. That is a subject in and of itself. I do not want to open up that can of worms. So, what did Jesus have to say about it as portrayed in the Bible? Now, remember, I don't think that the Jesus of the Bible was real. I think he might have been based on someone who was real, maybe some ones who were real, but I don't think the Jesus of the Bible was real. So I don't believe this ever happened. Okay. Well, let's look at Matthew 23, 31, 33, and 37. You testify against yourselves that you are descendants of those who murdered those prophets. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how can you escape being sentenced to hell? O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to you. Behold, your house is forsaken and desolate. Yay! Wow. No wonder Jesus wasn't popular. Hey, Wist. This is one of many, many passages in the New Testament that make me think that the New Testament was pro-Roman. There are many passages like this. I mean, why are you going to betray your own people like that? Especially if you're under the boot of Rome, which at that time was the most powerful empire in the world. Why are you going to do that? And then, Christians will say Jesus was a peaceful person. That doesn't sound peaceful to me. It sounds like he was cruising for a bruising. Sounds to me like he was trying to get people riled up. That's what it sounds like to me. And that's my personal opinion. And you're welcome to have a different opinion. We're all people, I don't care if you have a different opinion. Share it in the comments. What's your opinion? Do you think Jesus was peaceful? The Jesus as portrayed in the New Testament. Because, like I said, I don't think this Jesus actually existed. But anyway, do you think that the Jesus as portrayed in the New Testament was a peaceful dude? I'd like to know. I really would. Share your feelings and your insights in the comment section. Okay, moving on. These and other passages stereotyped the Jews as an icon of unredeemed humanity. Well, of course. According to the New Testament, it wasn't Pilate who crucified Jesus. Remember, the buck stopped with Pilate. Okay? Let's get that straight. The buck stopped with Pilate. And Pilate had no problem putting people to death. He was a very cruel man. But according to the Bible, it's the Jews that killed Jesus. And that's why we have so much, I'm not saying the word because instant demonetization, but, that word. Matthew's portrayal of Jesus' assault on the character of the Jewish people is by far the most elaborate and maligning. So again, we see this attack of the Jews from the very beginning of Christianity, even before Christianity is called Christianity. Hey, Flying, welcome. Stick around, you might learn something. Oh, why is that, Flying Man? Well, you know what? I'm not concerned with that. You're fine here. Freedom of speech and all that. Just don't say any slurs and you'll be fine. And welcome to my channel, by the way. All right, so let's see another place where Jesus maligned his own people, shall we? Then Jesus spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, saying, "The scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do, but do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do." And isn't that basically the entire thing of Christianity right now? Christians say and don't do. Oh, yeah, listen to them. Sure, listen to them. Except right now, don't listen to them because, especially here in America, they are very hateful for the most part. I know. Not all Christians are. Not all Christians are. I know. And you know what? I've got no problem with those Christians. I'm an atheist too, Flying. I've got no problem with those Christians. You know. Anyway, moving on. That can be a whole show in and of itself, but moving on. Okay, he says, the rabbi says, Jesus' message in this chapter, as portrayed by Matthew, may be deeply offensive. Gee, you think? Flying Man, I grew up as a YEC. According to the Synoptic Gospels, Jesus wore, I don't know how to pronounce that, but they're like the fringes of the robe. The commandment in the Torah to wear, okay, I'm going to try to pronounce this, tit. Let me spell that out. Hang on. All right. Yeah, I have no idea how to pronounce this. Different languages have different pronunciations, but that's how it's spelled. So, yeah, those are the fringes on your clothing. So that's what they're talking about. How many strings and knots are required? I don't fucking know. Which garments require such fringes? I don't know. But this is something that, the Jews would know. Are both men and women required to observe the commandment? Is a person permitted to wear a four-cornered garment made of linen but have fringes made of wool? After all, you can't have a garment made of two different fabrics. So, I don't know. But this is something the Jews would know, okay? All right. Then you've got, like, okay. So the problem with, I think, not sure, but I think what the Pharisees had a problem with when the Sadducees said they only accept the written Torah is that you have all of these questions, right? You have all of these questions about what Torah actually means. And so then, the Jews have another set of, I wouldn't call them scriptures, but it's called the Talmud, and these explain what the Torah means, right? So I think this is what the Pharisees meant, you know, like, what does this mean? You know, so I can see the Sadducees because they're the priestly class, right? They want all the power. But the Pharisees like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. You can't just say you only recognize the written Torah because you've got a lot of questions about what the written Torah is actually saying. So that's probably where the Pharisees came in. So then the next section is, sorry about that. I'm having some trouble with my sinuses, and I have a lot of postnasal drip. I know, TMI. Next section, oral law is vital to the exegesis of the Christian Bible. Now, remember, Christians don't believe in exegesis. They believe in eisegesis, taking one verse and then another verse and then another verse and tying it all together. You know, you can do that, but you're not going to get anything like a cohesive narrative if you do that. Okay, he says, the rabbi says, I recall preparing myself to read the New Testament for the first time. It was more than 30 years ago. I was a young product of the yeshiva, the Jewish school, trained and steeped in the traditional, deeply Orthodox Jewish world. My education was rigorous, but not unusual for my community. All the boys attended yeshiva, studied scripture, and spent many hours each day expounding and probing the Talmud. Now, remember what I said about the Talmud. The Talmud explains the Torah. I was sure no one in my community ever touched a Christian Bible, let alone read one. This aspect did not bother me. I readily accepted the fact that I would be alone in this venture. My situation was different. I believed I had a calling. I didn't see any visions or hear any voices from God. There came a point in my life, however, when I realized I was to fulfill an unusual mandate. My purpose in this world was to help Jews who were lost in the church return to their God and their people. Get converted if you're American, you can vote. Vote, vote, vote. Vote, vote, vote. So, excuse me. So I am going to make a, I think that's all I'm going to do for today in the book. Now I'm going to go into my channel, my plans for my channel and all that shit. I will do an entire series on baptism because it didn't just start with Christianity. I've already said that, you know, why did Jesus get baptized if Christianity wasn't a thing? And if baptism was for the remission of sins, as Paul said, then why did Jesus get baptized? Because according to the Christians, Jesus was sinless. Doesn't make any sense, does it? And when you pick apart Christianity little by little by little, you find it doesn't make sense. And then you pick it apart a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then finally, it all unravels. It all unravels. That's why Christians, particularly fundamentalist Christians, do not want their people questioning things. Because if their people start to question, they're going to find these little, things that don't make sense. And then they're going to start pulling them. And eventually, so if you've got a loved one caught up in that world, don't give up on them. Don't give up on them. So anyway, that'll be all for today. I love you folks. You know that. Why don't you go ahead and subscribe if you haven't? Hit the thumbs up. And if you are financially able, please join my channel. You can join for as little as 99 cents a month. And I will see you guys later. Bye.